Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, question of the week: are introverts control freaks? Thought of the week: what drives panic buying? And how does that link to introversion? And a discussion with Leon Bamforth. Leon is an award-winning speaker, consultant and mediator. He helps leaders build connected teams that share visions and avoid nightmares. If you're in the UK, you can't have failed to scratch your head at the ongoing petrol shortage. I'm wondering if I can get home tonight without getting stuck on the roadside. Now, we are assured that it's not a supply problem, and as I know many people in the industry, I believe those reassurances. And yet there's not much petrol about, is there? Intrigued by the panic buying of petrol, I asked Google what drives it. Of course, there were several stupid search results, then came some that made some sense. Dr. Audrey Tang, a psychologist and author of the new book The Leader's Guide to Resilience, says fear is the biggest reason for our panic buying. The brain, which is responsible for our survival, doesn't like being placed under threat, and fear starts to make us more selfish and focus on removing the fear rather than consider the consequences of our actions. Tang went on to talk about how we're attempting to get control in an unpredictable environment, and that made my mind drift to introversion and several conversations linking control, introversion, and social situations. Let's be clear for a second, introversion is not linked to panic buying, but the word control and Tang's point about dopamine piqued my interest. Introversion is not a fear of social situations, that's shyness. However, many introverts feel better by introducing control elements over the situations they feel uncomfortable in. Key part of STOP, which is a tool I use with many introverts, is to get a position if you're in a social situation like a large networking group. Having a role or a position in the gathering of people allows introverts to feel more in control. It's easier to join and leave conversations. Perhaps they are doing some research in the group and they can walk up and just say, "Can I just ask a quick question?" And of course, they can get out of that conversation by saying, "Thank you so much, I've got to go on and ask lots of other people." Public speaking has been described to me several times by several introverts as control. When on stage, they have control of the situation, explaining why many introverts don't worry about public speaking. Networking expert Will Kintish says a great tip for an introvert going to a networking event is to arrive early. They can see who arrives and choose who to talk to. That sounds like creating some control to me. If you manage a team, you'll have introverts in that team. Helping them have a feeling of control will help them perform more effectively. In meetings, a clear agenda that's followed will improve the meeting for everybody, especially the introverts. Collaborative working. Yes, introverts do enjoy collaboration. In fact, they love being part of a cohesive group where they add value. In small groups, they tend to be comfortable sharing ideas. Larger groups where there's a couple of extroverts battling to take control, yep, there's that word again, take control of the session, can prevent introverts from working as well. And then office noise. Can you provide quieter places in the office where people can work with less distraction? Introverts are no more or less likely to panic or panic buy than anybody else. I just saw this interesting link between that and control. Control helps reduce panic buying. It can also help improve people's performance. Put like that actually, it's obvious. So how can you help put people in control? This week's question: are introverts control freaks? So I'll be honest and say this question from Jen was behind my interest in control this week, but I didn't expect to link my panic buying musings. Firstly, despite what you might assume from my earlier points, introverts are not control freaks. That's not to say that some are not, but I'm sure you know many extroverted control freaks too. Control, to whatever level, helps everybody feel better. Many of the tips I share that you can use to help your introverts perform better give them some level of control. Meeting agendas, as we said earlier, Allow introverts for internal processing time as they prepare in advance. Isn't preparation a control mechanism? Being prepared to, at times, quieten the extroverts in a team is a control mechanism and will help the team discussion. And a totally unconnected example is my dislike of New Year's Eve. One, I just don't see it as something worth all the hype, but I recently realised the other reason is that I don't like New Year's Eve parties because I can't control when I leave. If I feel peopled out, there's an expectation that I'll stay until midnight regardless. In a sense, that's a lack of control. So what is a control freak? According to Wikipedia, that reliable source, but let's stick with it, it's a person with a personality disorder characterised by undermining other people, usually by way of controlling behaviour, manifested in the ways that they act to dictate the order of things in a social situation. Well, as most introverts are not trying to undermine others, I think there's no reason to say introverts are control freaks, Jen, but it's a great question, thank you. So let me know what tip you'd like to help activate the intrapreneurial skills in your business, or what question you'd like to know about introversion. Drop me an email, give me a call, or visit activateyourintrovert.co.uk. I'd love to hear from you. But now it's time to chat with Leon. Welcome, Leon. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, John. Thanks for having me on.
Really good to catch up with you finally. In a bit, we're going to talk about some of these team nightmares and visions. But just before we get into that, I'd really like to know, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And probably more importantly, what does it mean to you?
I filled out a personality test, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago now. And that put me down as, for 100 people, I was in the top 99% extroverted. So I'm very, very, very extroverted. I think it got it slightly wrong. I don't think I'm quite...
It's only number 98, do you really?
Yeah, maybe 98 or 97. I'm very extroverted.
And what does that mean to you?
Well, what was useful learning about what extroversion and introversion meant is I understood myself better. So I understood why I reacted the way I reacted in crowds, or why I felt that, why I love speaking. It really fills me up speaking in front of an audience. And I gain energy from speaking in front of people. And extroversion helps me understand why that's the case. And also it's really useful for me to understand how other people differ and how actually the energy that you get. My brother, for example, is very introverted. And the way he gets his energy is when he's been overstressed, he needs to go into a darkened room. He needs to, cut out the lights, and he needs that time just to once again refresh and recharge his batteries. Whereas I recharge by being with people.
And I think that's the great point about all of this. It's understanding other people and how you can work with them better. Perhaps that's a good point to jump on though. Why do you care about helping teams?
Because for me, this is how we've progressed as a civilization. If we look at everything that we've got, it's so unlikely that we've got it, from roads running, from my washing machine to the dishwasher to the, everything that we have. It's taken a team to develop and create. And we usually look at geniuses like Einstein, but in reality, it's teams that make humanity as great and phenomenal as it is. So it's really, really exciting going into a team that's maybe struggling a bit. After COVID, we're all struggling. We're all drained. We're all really not performing at our peak, and just going in and working with that team to help deal with the local things that they're dealing with. And, they've maybe got some visions that they kind of want to go towards. They've got some nightmares that they're really scared of and they really don't want to go towards, and actually trying to bring them together and align all that behind to find out what they really want to achieve, what they really don't want to achieve. Actually, it's amazing just seeing them just come together and just propel forward and just achieve amazing things just by unblocking a few things and point them in the right direction.
Sounds amazing. And I know when we were speaking about doing this recording, I was most impressed with some of the stuff you were talking around the vision space, which I want to touch on in a second. But tell me about the nightmares. What is this about team nightmares?
In the world of speaking and motivational speaking, we hear a lot about visions, don't we? And even in business, we hear loads and loads about, what's your vision? You need to have a positive goal. You need to create a vision board. where you put everything down that you want, and then you pray to it 3 times a day,
happens,
and it magically happens, and
Right.
you magically the universe gives you everything you want.
And you believe in the tooth fairy as well?
And I believe in the tooth fairy as well, although it's usually me wearing a tutu. As my daughter tells me.
Enough.
Yeah, but no, that was the image when my daughter found out the tooth fairy wasn't real. She's like, so it is you. But anyway, that's a story for another time. So we have this idea that we need a really clear goal in order to get what we want. And that's absolutely true. But just as important is understanding what we don't want. And actually what I found most motivating for me at times to get over difficult problems is actually the nightmare. The ultimate what don't I want? I just recently have lost 1.5 stone and got a lot healthier, but I'm coming up to my 40th birthday. And so the motivation for me isn't really to become a Greek god, but it's really because I don't want to be unfit. When my children are a little bit older and I'm getting a bit older, I still want that to be able to move around. I still want to be able to have that freedom. So that's the point, is it's actually the nightmare that helps you get to where you want to go. And a nightmare can be really valuable and useful if you really know what you want to go away from. In a team, it's exactly the same. We often have visions that we want and we clearly define them, but often the nightmares undermine us. So, for example, I was working with one team. I spent 9 months with this team, helping them align together to deliver a £10 million project we were working on. There were 12 teams as part of this, and sit down with each one individually and then as the individual teams, and we'd align everyone together to achieve a vision, to achieve the goal that we had to achieve. And it was beautiful and phenomenal. And I absolutely loved just bringing everyone together as a team rather than seeing themselves as the disparate 12 teams. However, at the end of that time, the company sadly had to go through a restructuring process and had to have some redundancies. And it was sad but interesting to observe how all of a sudden this team that were really coming together, being creative and willing to do things in creative ways, all that went, because all of a sudden they were all scared about losing their jobs.
Yep.
So they can no longer do creative things because, well, what happens if I do something that then says I don't need it, that shows I don't need to be here anymore, and they could automate my job or whatever it is. So the nightmare in that situation really squashed potential for further improvement and further progression. And being aware of that means then you can deal with it.
That makes some sense. In your experience, do introverts and extroverts react differently to things like visions and the team nightmares, I guess?
I don't think it's necessarily that they react differently, because we're all human and we all have these basic needs and wants to progress and develop. So we've all got nightmares, we've all got visions. But introverts and extroverts may have slightly different. There's the ultimate visions and nightmares, then there's the immediate visions and nightmares. Are you worried about not eating today, for example?
Mm-hmm.
A vision and nightmare at work for an extrovert might be, actually, I'm stuck in a room in an office and not speaking to anyone and no one to talk to. And actually, that's absolute hell for me. Whereas an introvert, I was a computer programmer for 10 years, and the vast majority of my fellow computer programmers are introverted because they loved not having to talk to someone. They didn't want to interact with someone because that drains their energy, and they just wanted to get on with a deep dive into a really fascinating subject. So it just helps to really understand. If I take an introvert and try force them to have the vision of an extrovert, it's just not going to work, because you need to fundamentally understand who that person is. So it's really, for me, the language of visions and nightmares is a useful way of describing what happens in reality.
And so if I was a leader, I might need to think differently when I'm either eliciting or describing my vision for the team or the nightmare for the team, and do that differently with different types of people. It's kind of what I'm hearing from you.
Exactly. The vision and nightmare for a team has to be a negotiation. It's not like you can, as the leader, set the vision. I mean, sometimes if you do it particularly well,
set the direction, but you don't necessarily.
Exactly. But but you can't force someone to take on your vision. It's a negotiation. And so if you're talking to an extrovert, then you might use different aspects of the vision of, we might win an award for this, and we'll get in front, and you'll be in front of all at the front on the stage of all your peers, and everyone will be clapping you, and we'll win this award. It'll be amazing. Well, that might be the absolute nightmare for the introvert. That might, you tell that to an introvert and they might say, I'm good, thanks. I've no desire to do any of that. So you just need to find the thing that motivates them.
But it's the same, you're doing the same thing with them, but
Yeah.
it's about their individual motivations, which connect them to that vision. Okay, that's brilliant. One quick question, because we're kind of starting to run out of time. How has the pandemic and the whole hybrid home working, office working, what do you think is going to happen in the future?
One big thing it has affected is it's splintered teams. So whereas before we could all get together in an office and work together, and often whether they were really connected or not, but there are people now being able to hide at home. You just turn your camera off. You're in a big meeting. You don't have to engage. And actually, it's quite hard to see who is engaging and who's not engaging. So just being much more aware that actually maybe those people that are introverted are much more willing to take the easier route of not engaging quite as much. But you really, really need their valuable insights and input, and just be aware how best to work with them.
I think that's a really interesting point, though, because I've spoken to a number of introverts who have been accused of being not engaged because they weren't going back to their team leader, their whatever, going, here's what I've done, boss, and I've done this, and I've done this, which the extroverts were. So they were accused of being unengaged, and yet what they really doing were working very methodically for all of the stuff they were going to do.
Yeah.
And they delivered on it far more quickly than the ones that were ringing up their best every day, showing off everything they've done. So it's quite interesting how people define engagement.
I found there's no correlation between confidence and competence. Usually the correlation of confidence is between confidence and extroversion. So it's really saying the same thing that you just said, that when the people that want to engage because they're confident and they enjoy getting in front of people, then they're the ones you listen to and think they're doing well. Whereas actually, and so just being really aware of how different situations affect people. And exactly as you're saying there, those little cues that sometimes are used to say we're successful are often just confidence and extroversion. We like extroversion.
I like that distinction, as you said, confidence and competence, very different things.
Yeah.
Could we finish up quickly with a tip for an introverted team leader to help engage his team?
Being aware that confidence and competence are not correlated. And so just paying attention to who your team are and recognizing that the thing that matters is how successful and how much output they've got at the end of it and whether they can complete the tasks.
Like that. And equally, perhaps for an extroverted team leader who's wanting to get all of her team engaged and maybe she's struggling with engaging some of the introverts.
Take the time to listen to them, to really find out about them, really find out what makes them tick, really find out what they want to achieve. And as you listen one-on-one rather than in a big group situation, they're much more likely to engage and tell you the things that they're frustrated with or that they're excited about.
Love it. Thank you. Leon, it's been really good talking to you. And I know we could talk for ages, and we probably will once I press the stop recording button. But just for now, how can listeners get back in touch with you?
The easiest way is probably my website, www.leonbanforth.com.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to talk.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.
Well, wasn't that an interesting discussion? And I'd love to know what you thought. Share your thoughts in the Facebook page, Activate Your Introvert. For me, the best parts were, well, firstly, that team vision is a negotiation. I thought that was a really interesting idea. Very much agree with Leon. Competence and confidence are not related. And nightmares often undermine the vision. So it's important to be clear on what you and your team don't want. I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.